Rob here, and in this video we're going to be looking at Assassin's Creed 3 and Ubisoft, the publisher of the Assassin's Creed franchise. So within section B, as you can see, you might get questions about industries, audiences or media context. Today we're going to be looking at the media industries. Theory-wise, Curran and Seaton is going to be one of our key theories. Ubisoft are a major manufacturer, they're a major publisher of video games. So it ties in with the idea that the video game industry, just like any other media industry, is controlled by a small number of companies that are primarily driven by the logic of profit and power. In this case, primarily profit. There are a handful of major video game publishers that dominate the video game industry. So there's a lot of concentration in this industry. Ubisoft are part of that. Once upon a time, even if you go back to the days of the old Xbox, original one, and the PlayStation 2 around the turn of the millennia, there was a much greater variety in the kinds of games that are available. You had Nintendo as well, with the N64 and the GameCube at the time. There were many more original titles. There were franchises, but there were fewer of them. And then when the financial crisis, the banking crisis happened in 2008, just like the film industry and a lot of other media industries, the video game industry got a lot more conservative and a lot more risk averse. There are far fewer independent games companies available nowadays. Having said that, though, there are new markets in the form of mobile gaming, which is where there is greater diversity. The indie gaming circuit has got a lot more diversity in it, and there are, especially on the Xbox network for example, there are lots of indie games you can get. But the game industry consoles was entirely dominated by major franchises, which is where Hesbergalt comes in. Just like most media industries, the video game industry wants to minimize risk and maximize audiences. They do this by being horizontally and vertically integrated, but they mainly do it through formatting their cultural products. Stars are part of this, yes, but it's franchises and genres, but particularly franchises that are the key selling points. And these companies are operating across a variety of different platforms. They don't just make video games, they're branching out into other ways to exploit their key franchises as well, their key brands, which we'll get on to later. The last bullet point there is of less importance in this argument. So those are your key theories. Let's have a look at who Ubisoft are, and let's define some of the key terms. One of the first things you're going to need to know is what a AAA game is. If we look at Hesbergalt, this idea of franchises, this is where AAA games come in. AAA games are the top franchises. They're the most popular, biggest selling games. Notice it can be written in two different ways. It can be written in full or just written AAA. Alright? AAA games are largely made by major publishers. Sometimes they might be made by mid-sized ones, but it's major publishers that do it mostly. They will have huge production budgets. It can cost hundreds of millions of dollars to produce a new video game. As we get into a world of high definition, really powerful consoles, the amount of time and effort it takes to produce a video game is going up exponentially to the point that it's becoming extremely expensive. Only the largest companies can afford to do it. With that comes enormous marketing budgets. As I said, they're becoming increasingly risk averse. There are fewer and fewer original games being released nowadays. Much more they're concentrating on sequels, and it takes years and years to develop games now. I literally bought a PS5 sorry, PS4 about 5 years ago to play The Last of Us 2, and it's only got released last year. So this is where Assassin's Creed comes in. It is one of the big franchises. It's up there with things like your Final Fantasies and your Zelda games and your Marios and your Call of Duties and Halo. These are your AAA classification games. Assassin's Creed is a long-running franchise. Been going since 2007. So it was around the time of the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. These games have been coming out with a new one pretty much every year since. Obviously, the latest one is Valhalla. Not only have they been doing the games for your major platforms, but they've been doing spin-off games as well. You will notice, for example, that some of the earlier games started off, I mean, if we look at Assassin's Creed 3, which is 2012, originally it was a PlayStation 3 exclusive. Later on, it was also released on other platforms, the Xbox 360 and on Windows. Since then, it's been what they call ported. Well, it got ported onto the other platforms, but it's also been ported onto other platforms. It's old enough now that you can run that on a tablet. So there's Android versions of it, for example. But it's been continually remastered for newer, more high-definition platforms. So it's on Xbox One, it's on PlayStation 4, Wii U and Nintendo Switch. So it's been continually updated and re-released as new platforms come out. So originally it would have just been on one platform. Make a note of which key platform it was and what year they were released. Obviously Assassin's Creed 3 in 2012 and more likely Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation in 2012 are the key ones to be focusing on. Remember, this was originally a PlayStation Vita exclusive, but later on got ported onto the other platforms. You can make a note of the other games in the franchise. Maybe Valhalla would be the one to mention as the newest one. You are more likely to have played some of these newer ones. If you want to mention those, do so. But make a note of 2012 on these two games here. So pause the video, make some notes. The other thing to bear in mind here is that these ones are obviously for mobile gaming. iOS or iOS, whatever you want to call it, and Android on more portable platforms, smartphones specifically, which have basically killed off things like the PlayStation Vita. Next slide. The Assassin's Creed franchise has been a massive money spinner for Ubisoft. It has sold over 155 million units in its lifespan. 100 million plus people are playing Assassin's Creed games in the world. It has been Valhalla has been a record revenue spinner for Ubisoft, and it's a record money spinner for the entire franchise. In particular, Assassin's Creed 3 and Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation in 2012-2013 was the previous record holder for the franchise in terms of money. This one has beaten that by 50%. So it's been a huge, huge, huge money spinner. But who are Ubisoft? And let's look at Assassin's Creed 3 in particular. Why are we looking at Assassin's Creed 3 and Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation, which is the key game we're looking at? We're looking at this because they were launched at the same time. they were launched to promote two new consoles. Now, PlayStation 3 had been around for a while. It was pretty new, but it had been around for a couple of years. But what Sony were doing is they were replacing the PlayStation Portable, the PSP, with a new portable gaming platform called the Vita, which they discontinued last year, early this year, I can't remember. But they were launching this new handheld platform, and they released Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation as the killer app, the unique selling point, as Russell Reeves would have called it, for this new console. So what they were doing was using a AAA franchise to sell their new console, the PS Vita, in the hope that if you were a hardcore Assassin's Creed fan, you would buy this new games console just to play the new Assassin's Creed game. And even if you weren't a hardcore console gamer, the Assassin's Creed franchise is at least a very, very well-known AAA franchise. You know, even if you've never played any of the games, you've probably heard of Assassin's Creed, and therefore it might be the game that would persuade you to buy a PS Vita if you were in the market for a portable gaming platform. So it's that synergy, it's that convergence which makes this game, these two games, worthy of study. That's why they're, even though they're old, they're the ones we're looking at. They were both these games, Assassin's Creed 3 and its spin-off Liberation, were released simultaneously across all three major games markets, that's Japan, North America and Europe, to maximise the impact of the release. The two games were also interconnected. There were certain levels in the games you could only play if you had both consoles and both games. So originally they were PlayStation exclusives, and it took a couple of years before they were ported onto other platforms. So who are Ubisoft? Ubisoft are Ubisoft Entertainment SA. They're a French video games publisher. They are both vertically and horizontally integrated. They're the fourth largest video game company in the Americas and Europe, so that doesn't include Japan. They own numerous subsidiaries across North America, Europe and Asia, most of which are named after the city they're based in, like Ubisoft Montreal in Canada. Pause the video, write that down. Next slide. Ubisoft have a couple of really major franchises. They own the rights to the Tom Clancy games, like Ghost Recon, for example, Rainbow Six, all the other ones. Other than Assassin's Creed, the other big franchise, I guess, is Far Cry, which is now on Far Cry 6, I think, now, isn't it? Is that out yet? It's coming out soon. Again, Watch Dogs, that's on its third iteration nowadays. Prince of Persia is one of the other ones. I don't know if I've done Prince of Persia lately, but that was going back into the sands of time. Was one of their big franchises. Driver was another classic back on the old Xbox. Loved Driver, it was brilliant on the original Xbox. Oh no, the original PlayStation. And Just Dance is another popular one. But these are these two and the Ghost and the sort of like the Tom Clancy franchises are their top franchises. So make it and pause the video, make a note of Assassin's Creed and Far Cry and Tom Clancy. They're your top ones. Next slide. Now, in terms of the production context, like we said, Ubisoft have got many subsidiaries, each based in different cities. Each one of these subsidiaries specialises in a certain job. They do certain things. Now, Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation was a collaboration between three different subsidiaries of Ubisoft. It was a multinational development. That is typical of games production now, where you spread it around the world and each different company does a little bit, especially with large companies like Ubisoft rather than independent ones. So the lead developer was Ubisoft Montreal in Canada. But you also had some of it done by Sofia and some of it done by Milan, right? So different countries, North America and Europe. This is horizontal integration. These companies are all involved in video game development. They're all on the same level, so it's horizontal integration, right? That's obviously going to link to currency, the idea that these large companies are horizontally and vertically integrated, makes it more profitable, creates synergy. Pause, write that down. Next slide. What makes them vertically integrated? Well, video games increasingly are not something that's being sold on a shiny plastic disc, like Blu-ray. Yes, physical boxed content is still a major selling point. You can still go into places like Game, or increasingly into your supermarkets, or into places like HMV, and you can still buy these games on a physical hard copy. But increasingly, especially with the new consoles, we're moving towards more of a streaming platform, where you can go on something like, oh well, it's a digital platform at least, so you've got your a la carte download services where you can go and download the game off somewhere like Steam or Amazon. Or there's fully online gaming like Stadia, which is a Google thing, isn't it? Right? But they've got their own digital platform called Uplay. This is where you can go and download the games. You can buy them straight off Ubisoft and download them straight onto your computer or onto your console. Right? So Uplay is again a subsidiary of Ubisoft Entertainment SA. So because Ubisoft Entertainment SA can both produce games and distribute them via their own digital platform, it makes them vertically integrated. So pause the video, make a note of that. Next slide. Ubisoft are one of the major players in video games. Like I said, they've got some pretty big franchise titles. And this is across all platforms. The new generation of platforms, the PS5, the Xbox Series X and S, they are the second leading ranked publisher, with Assassin's Creed, Watch Dogs and the new game Immortals, Phoenix Rising, all in the top 7 best-selling games of 2020. So, you know, they are a big deal. They're one of the major players. Pause, write that down. Next slide. Remember though, we said that they aren't just working in one industry. Diversification and trying to exploit your brand in as many ways as possible is also important for major conglomerates. It's all part of synergy. You want to make as much profit out of your brands, your titles, your franchises as you can. So merchandising and other kinds of marketing are important. So Ubisoft also has a music division, Ubisoft Music, and UbiLoud. UbiLoud is Ubisoft's music label, and they publish the music that is in video games. So the soundtrack for the video games is available to buy. You can download it. You can get it straight off UbiLoud, or in this case you can go to Amazon and download it as an MP3, or you can stream it off their streaming service, Amazon Music, a la carte, on demand. You can probably even buy, you know, game soundtracks on vinyl. I've got the Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon soundtrack on vinyl by Power Glove. I love that album, it's great. You know, so, you know, this in itself is an industry. It's a you know, you're buying video game music just like buying soundtracks to movies is a thing. So the idea that as Hesmegalt says, these big conglomerates work across different cultural industries, games and in this case music. There's also their film division, which we'll get onto in another video, where they're talking about actually exploiting. There has been an Assassin's Creed movie, and Netflix are going to be turning it into a TV series as well. But there are other ways they can make money. As part of the Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation release, there are exclusives you can have with things like what they call DLCs, downloadable content. This can be in the terms of extra levels, spin-off games, but it can also be in terms of exclusives. So, you know, pre-order exclusives, for example. So if you pre-order a game from a certain place, let's say HMV or Game or Amazon, they will come with different, what's it called, sort of like DLC exclusives, exclusive content. So in this case, for example, if you bought it for the PS3 from the PS3 store, you got extra stuff. So you could receive an exclusive mission. So if you had Assassin's Creed 3 on the PS3 and you had Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation on the PlayStation Vita, there were certain games you could play as Connor, who was the main character from Assassin's Creed 3, or Aveline, who was the main character from Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation. And you got extra stuff like an ammunition pouch, which wasn't available if you didn't have both contents. There was also the Mysteries of the Bayou pack, which came with pre-orders in PAL regions. PAL means Europe, principally, and Australasia, as opposed to NTSC, which was North America and Japan, I think. So, if you were in a PAL region, you've got this stuff, these extra things which you couldn't get if you got it from any other region. So, it's an incentive to pre-order the game, because you didn't get that if you didn't get it in the pre-order. Pause the video, make notes. Next slide. Oh, that's the last slide. Sorry. Right, so what we're going to be doing in the next video then is we're going to be looking at this in more detail. This video and the PowerPoint will be available in the OneDrive folder as well as on the YouTube channel. So if you've got any questions, you know where I am. Talk to you in the next one.